Through the binoculars, I saw that, but huge. The billowing surface looked pretty velvety, like the underside of the lemon, and in the softness there was a pattern of ridges and depressions, and in that pattern there was the unmistakable swirl of faces. I put the binoculars down. I knew those faces. The omnibushi bumped roughly against the tiny pier. Better, better get in there and see what's happening, Carl said. I waved my bone key token in front of the bayside door. It called me skinny and unlocked. But when it opened, there was no depot. Instead, I stared at a wall of the same material that bloomed on the airfield, pale, creamy, billowing, and patterned with familiar faces. They were variously aesthetic and anguished and accusing and calm. Up close, the smell was overpowering banana and gunpowder. For a moment, I was hypnotized. Then, tentatively, I extended a finger and poked at one of the faces. The substance yielded like foam. It had the consistency of lembas. It was lembas. Carl was at my side, holding an oar. Careful there, he said. He probed the ballooning substance with the butt of the oar, and it fell away. Behind the lembas was more lembas, but the depot was full of it. Agrippa's coats were clustered at the edge of the airfield, clearly perturbed by the apocalyptic puff pastry that had invaded their domain. Their keeper stood among them. He looked more placid. Agrippa, I called. How did this happen? Don't ask me, he said. The ghosts woke me up. They were freaking out. Have you called anyone? No. I wanted to sputter in protest. I remembered who I was dealing with. I ran to the control tower, descended the spiral staircase, and waved my bone key. The door opened, still, too skinny, revealing the concourse. Just inside my workstation was safe, unaffected. The Vitruvian wobbled apprehensively. The chemistry starter was quiet in its tub, but farther down the concourse, there where Jana Mitra's lab had been, the limbas had formed a massive trunk that reached up to grip the ceiling. There it splayed out in a dramatic many-fingered star, and one of its fingers had found the skylight above the lemon groove and pushed its way through to form the base of the bulbous structure rising on the airfield. Below it, the lemon groove had been consumed entirely. A few dark leaves were suspended in the lembas like feathers. Were suspended in the lembas like feathers on the nose of a cartoon cat. The great bloom of limbas blocked the sunlight, so the only illumination came from the grow rooms, which cast their pink glow across a rippling scene that also had a soundtrack. Shaman's album was playing, and not the spare overture, but the later tracks, the ones in which he had accelerated the songs of the mass and overlaid them with rising sirens, bursts of noise, and a driving oomph oomph oomph. It was a fungal party hellscape. The nimbus was not finished. Around the absorbed lemon groove, it was growing in hungry surges. Was it obeying the ounces? I watched it bulge, sickly in time to the music. Then a figure darted into view. It was Horace, wielding a wide book, charging forward, poking at the lambas, slashing it, gaining ground. Just beyond the groove was his life. Horace was holding the lambas at bay. His shouts echoed, "Back!" He hollered, "Back!" I kicked at the brakes on the Vitruvian's wheeled base, spun it around, and pushed forward. We coasted together down the yellow tape road, the arm's momentum almost overbalancing it as we caromed into workstations. Caromed? Shouldn't it be crammed? Caromed into workstations and refrigerators before reaching the place where Horace was making his stand. He had his heels set, swiping with the book as the lembas encircled him, own spirals. I locked the Vitruvian's brake and grabbed at Horace's shirt. Let the arm do it! Then all my scorn for the programmers on interface drained away as I shouted, "Arm, change task, say hello!" And the Vitruvian began to swing a wide, slow arc where Horace's book had been making scratches. The arm made great gorges. It was tireless. The Lembas could not pass. I heard a howl and turned to see Stephen Agrippa emerge from the depot's vehicle ramp. He was running, Hercules the alpaca beside him, and all the goats a pace behind. Agrippa urged them forward with feral hoots and yips. Hercules spat. The lembas was vast but brittle. Where its growth had slowed in, it left an airy matrix, like the crumb of one of my loaves, but scaled up massively. So when we struck it, the Vitruvian with its great fist, Hercules with his hoofs, Agrippa and I taking swipes with fingers, curls into claws, it broke away in ragged chunks that tumbled and bounced to be consumed by the ravenous and frankly terrifying goats. The goats feasted, the lembas shrank. I reached out gently and brought a sliver of substance to my tongue. It didn't dissolve into slime or stick to my teeth. This lembas was a light, crispy bread with a deep well of flavor. It was really good. Horace was still swinging with his book, enraged, protecting his archive. I unlocked the Vitruvius brakes and pushed it slowly forward on its base. Its great swipes sent chunks of lembas, the size of beer kegs, arcing slowly through the air. At last it was too much. The lembas could not hold. A thin crack crept up the trunk that then spiderwebbed out, and it all began to fracture, glacier-like, huge slabs coming unstuck. The giant top, deprived of its foundation, came tumbling down, but gently. I tucked my chin into my chest, covered my head up with my hands, and held my breath. The collapse was nearly soundless, just the whisper of a Rice Krispie treat moving against itself. I peeked. I was covered in the stuff. Everything was covered in the stuff. The smell of bananas was overpowering. Later that morning, the people of Maru Fair surveyed the damage in a deep, padded silence. Sometimes during the scuffle, Shaman's album had reached the end of its oonsing, and the playlist mercifully had not been set to repeat. Thank God. The Lembas had filled much of the depot, and Agrippa was going corridor to corridor with his insatiable boots. Hercules, however, had reached his limit. The alpaca was sitting in the ruin of the lemon grove, apparently asleep. Horace had successfully defended his archive, and the cricket farm had resisted the Lembas without assistance. There, the wave front stopped abruptly, ragged edged ragged-edged gnawed to a standstill by thousands of tiny mouths. The crickets chirped contentedly. I looked around the depot for a moment. I saw it with a creeper's eyes. These were the ruins of a glittering overnight civilization. These were aeons packed into those hours. More people were milling around the depot now, and the spell was breaking. I heard cries of alarm and dismay, and then increasingly laughter. Vendors dug out their workstations, checked to see what had been wrecked and what was intact. Our bodies were all coated grey green with a dusting of lembas. We might have been made of lembas ourselves. Lily Velasco arrived, her lips curling in disbelief that such a disaster could have unfolded on the day before the market's public launch. She conscripted Orly and me to help Nas excavate the coffee bar and return the espresso machine to operational status. Quick, she urged, quick, quick, quick. We all worked together, hauling the lembas away in slabs, piling it up like firewood. Finally, we reached the epicenter, and there we found Jenna, who had scratched out a little cave for herself. I'd expected panic. Instead, she was exultant. The bioreactor told the tale. The metal twisted apart in a wicked pucker. It had been breached from the inside. Through the broken skylight, I heard sirens on the airfield. You used the starter? I said. You just took it? Jenna nodded, unrepentant. Her eyes flashed white and wild beneath a mask of lembas dust. The fire department blocked off the airfield and set up a perimeter around the control tower, clearing us out of the depot, but there was a languor to their efforts. The bloom wisquescent. In its great leap into the world above, the hybrid lembas and Clement Street starter seemed to have burned itself out. The firefighters stood around, not sure what to do. A helicopter hung low overhead. I waved. You can eat it, I heard one firefighter say to another. Eat it, the other said. Yeah, not that I'm gonna, but you can. All the vendors of the Marrow Fair stood in a loose ring around the control tower, chatting and checking phones. I saw Jenna coming around the side of the brewery, leading a scrum of people in lab coats. I recognized one of the figures, tall and scary skinny. It was Dr. Clamels from Slurry Systems of Fresno, California. You're in charge of the market, he said to Velasco. That's right, she said. She was on her fifth espresso and seemed finally to have found her equilibrium. I need to assert our intellectual property rights in this matter. We have a claim under the Budapest Treaty. My claimants as Marrow theory was dashed. You'll have to work that out with Mr. Marrow, Velasco said. Velasco said, I'll pass along your assertion. Please, we have to do work here. What to do? I rounded on Jana. Did you do this on purpose? I waved at the city scale peniton. Of course not, she said flatly. Her face was still dusted grey green. I was terrified, but she had the Jana look in her eyes, that gleam. Consider the physics of it, the efficiency. I estimated the mass and even accounted for gas inflation. It's at nearly the thermodynamic optimum. Don't you see? Almost perfect conversion. Cool. But did you see your bioreactor? It exploded. Dr. Clamet waved his hand dismissively in the direction of the boom. We'll build a stronger one. We have to tame it. Yes, but that's the breakthrough. We have something to tame. Dr. Mitra found the key. Did she? They both looked at me with eyes hard and bright, while the tower of pale nimbus behind them glittered in the rising sun. Yes, I did, Jana said it with the confidence of recitation. I cultured it myself from freely occurring bacteria in the environment. That's how sourdough starter works, you know. Because the hybrid lembas was safe to eat, the bloom was ruled not a biohazard, and therefore not subjected to the various quasi-military quarantine procedures that would otherwise have been triggered. The CDC had nothing to say about the snacks the size of houses. The weekend following the boom, the bridges and the tunnels into Alameda were crowded to a standstill, and the ferries were packed full with curious residents bringing their families to inspect up close the phenomena they've seen from across the bay. They parked wherever they could find space. Cars spilled onto the airfield and walked across the cracked asphalt to break off a piece of the landmass and tentatively put it between their lips. A thick swirl of people circled the group, levering of large chunks, which were broken into smaller pieces and handed down to children who liked it most of all. The whole scene was very cloudy with the chance of meatballs, very stregonon. An intrepid falafel truck pulled up and began to fry bits of the bloom into a new kind of pickle. Agrippa and his goats watched from a distance. Below the market had its grand opening. It wasn't the one Mr. Farrow had planned. Mr. Marrow had planned. It was 10 times better. 50,000 people came to Alameda that day. People sampled cricket cookies and toothfish tacos and pink light kale. Every teenager on the airfield gripped one of the smoothies with things swimming inside them. I'd never find out what those were. A week passed. Traffic across the Bay Bridge resumed its normal speed as drivers bought their fill of the sight. The bloom sagged, sagged on the airfield, depleted but still enormous. Even the assembled nibbling power of the Bay Area had left it largely intact. Damit's team erected a field of laboratory beside it. They were trying to reverse engineer the bloom, determine what had activated it so they could do so again, this time in Fresno inside a stronger wort, a bigger one too. I saw Jenna stalking the bloom's perimeter, gazing up at it with a hungry expression. I'd say the Jenna girl is like a mad woman, but yeah, so this was like the grand finale. Now we're going to see some loose ends tied up. I know this book would not be interesting for all people, but it has like some element of magical mystery, which I like. Mysticism also, and then again, like the narrator herself said that it has a bit of like cloudy with a chance of meatballs kind of kick to it, you know. So interesting. It's very like PG-13 and like a normal, maybe even a kid's book, but I like it. Fine. The Lewis Club concluded finally. It's incredible, said Hilltop Lewis. She held up a newspaper, the struggling local edition, and rattled it for emphasis. On the front paper there was an aerial photo of the bloom, and below it the headline, Kingston's Market Explodes. Kingston's? Can I read that? I snatched the paper away without waiting for a reply. The whole story of the Marrow Fair was unfurled. The reporter, after some digging in the Alameda County Records Office, had worked her way through several shell companies to divine the identity of the market's owner. What? Charlotte Kingston. I read the school time. Amazing, isn't it? So was Charlotte Kingston the Mr. Marrow? Yeah, I had completely forgotten. Okay. Amazing, isn't it? Hilltop said. As I made my way through the story, my stomach gradually unclenched. I've been expecting to see my own name, but there was no mention of a local baker and or irresponsible microbial steward, Louis Clary. The story said the source of non-toxic environmental disruption was a runaway experiment by Lemba's labs, which, it explained, had been recently acquired by the slurry systems of Fresno, California. Unfortunately, that put Slurry on the hook. Liability-wise, several people had gotten sick, gorging themselves on Lemba's fritters, and a collision on the Bay Bridge was being blamed on the visual distraction of the moon. Are you okay with that? Compact Lewis called. I put the paper down and looked at the Lewises. Can I tell you a story? In the kitchen, over glasses of port, I unspooled it. I told them about lemon street soup and sourdough and the food I'd loved so intensely, so briefly. They gave me something when they left. I said, it was a gift. I told them about the status quo and Agrippa and his boats and the trip to Fresno with Jenna. It took an hour to tell it. The Lewises listened rapt. At the end, they each had a different opinion. Maybe you can get your old job back, Professor Lewis said. Open a new bakery, is what I say, Hilltop Lewis thumped her fist on the countertop. Down in Coal Valley, it's a great neighborhood. What about stock in the company? Compact Lewis asked. What was it called? Sludgy? You could sue for that. Old Doris pursed her lips. She was either annoyed or amused. I couldn't tell. I prodded her. Well, what do you think? Oh, it's obvious, she said smugly. You must go visit this young man, Burek? Yes, Burek. That I did not expect. Somebody get a mirror, Louis the baker. If you could see your own face when you talk about your messages back and forth, you'd know it too. Professor Lewis started to speak, but old Lewis held up a hand exquisitely wrinkled to silence her. She needs to go. There was a vibration in her voice that told the whole story. The most respected elder Lewis and some other soul and a risky journey long ago. And a reward? A disappointment? Go, she said. It will be worth it. A reward then. Hilltop Lewis sighed limply. Well, there are Lewis clubs all over the world. Old Louis cackled at that. Then another Louis was laughing, and another, and then it was all of us Louises laughing together in a dark shingled house on the hill behind the hospital with a view of the park and the ocean beyond. I like this little Louis Club thing. I feel like they made a joke out of like how common the name Louis is, like how people would be like, this name is so common, you should open a club kind of a thing. I think there should be a Kritika club too, a club of Kritikas, because there's just like a lot of us are the people born on 30th December. There should be a club of us. We are like lot. You would think it'd be rare, but it's not. Mr. Marrow. I confronted Charlotte Princeton in her garden behind Cafe Candide as she squatted beside a grid of bushy arugula, picking the wildest fawns, picking the widest fawns, leaving the others to grow larger. It was less a lie, she said languidly, and more of a considered omission. She didn't look like the secret impresario of an underground market dressed now in sturdy jeans and a pink linen shirt and a banded collar. Her hair swept back behind a pink headband. I should have known Mr. Marrow was the kind of person whose headband matched her top. Was it just a game? Her expression was firm. I believe everything I ever said as Mr. Marrow. I believe also that this restaurant is a precarious place. Can't I believe both? I think I can. What about tending your garden? Kingston smiled distantly. Oh, what about that book? I still love it, but I also wonder how it could possibly have resonated so powerfully with a 23-year-old who had seen so little of the world. Now that I've actually suffered, I find it somewhat theoretical. But why do it all in secret? Surely a market known to be organized by Charlotte Kingston would be a huge deal. Overnight, the ferry building itself would have a rival. Kingston's gaze turned inward, and more gently she said, "It never occurs to people that maybe I'd like to be the reckless one, the disruptor. As the years have passed, I have discovered in myself this energy. Is it anger? A touch of spite? I'm not sure." She looked back toward the restaurant. The beans on their strings were rippling on a breeze so gentle I couldn't feel it. I can't be reckless with the cafe. We directly support 27 farms and ranches. I almost 400 people. And there's my staff, of course. She looked at me wickedly. I wanted a place to break things, and that place is my marrow fed. So what happens now? Now the market is open. We see what succeeds. Oh, and guess what? Through my investment in Jana and her Lembas Labs, I now own 3% of a company called Slurry System. Isn't that interesting? They say it might be worth $1 billion. She stood and brushed off her jeans. You should join us here at the cafe. You can't be serious. Why not? Learn more from Mona. She'll teach you how to make that sourdough pizza crust we were talking about. You're beyond the novice's grace now. She wasn't wrong. But this wasn't the place I wanted to learn. And I paid for that robot, don't forget. What were the terms again? I think I own 20% of your company, if there is a company. I walked out through the cafe's burnished dining room, the acolytes setting tables, their shadows moving in the dark wood. It really was a beautiful place. There was a bowl of plums sitting alone on a table. I plucked one out and ate it on the way to the tray. The beginning. On food blogs and in social media posts, the eaters of the Bay Area rendered their first judgments of the marrow fare. These ranged from deep appreciation to utter bafflement. People said Charlotte Kingston had betrayed everything she ever stood for. Others said she was plotting a commendable course for the future. Everyone agreed. The bookstore at the back of the market was a gem. Horace, spooked by the near loss of his archive, finally pieced together a book proposal and sold it to a publisher in Berkeley. He was to write a wide ranging literary history of eating. It was to be finished in 2 years. His face was pale when he told me. Jenna and Dr. Clamets retreated to Fresno with a sample of substance that had bloomed above the marrow fair. They would become acquainted with the chemistry starter now and record their own catalogue of phenomena. They would learn a lot using their sequencers and bioreactors. But would they ever suspect the crucial role that music played? Maybe I'd send them a clue, maybe not. In Berlin, Burek had opened his own restaurant. He sent me a picture of the space he'd leased in Kreuzberg. It was no larger than my apartment, but it faced a busy street, and inside there were three tiny glorious tables. The process had not been without intramass drama, but Bio was untethered. Out of necessity, I read the very first chapter, The Soul of Sourdough, the one I skipped about and capturing a wild starter, following Everett Bloom's instructions. I set a dish of flour and water on the windowsill and watched it closely. Within a week, it was bubbling, and that's all it ever did. This sourdough starter was party of two, just yeast and lactobacillus, like every other starter in the world except for one. I returned to the J. Steve Value oven in the backyard. In my absence, the Cabrillo Street cats had made it into their lair. I shooed them away and built a fire. Cornelia came outside and watched me learn to bake again for the first time. Mainly, we sat in companionable silence. Then one morning, after we'd pulled a couple of particularly plump loaves from the J. Steve, I told her I was leaving. A lot of people have lived in that apartment, she said, but none of them have ever fed me before you came along. I told her I'd leave her some of the starters so she could bake her own bread. She narrowed her eyes. What am I getting myself into? Is it high maintenance? It I don't like high maintenance. Not this one, I said. It's boring. Okay. Nice ending. And I'm understanding this book much more the second time. From you. Like the first time I did not understand the climax at all, and now I'm finally getting it. Okay, from you. There's a crate here at the restaurant in Kreuzberg. It's enormous, and it's addressed to the number one eater. Is it a mistake? Ariel said the crate. I banged on it and called your name, but there was no reply. Then I pried it open, sorry, but there was just another box inside. This one is bright blue with a lightning bolt. Louis, what's going on? From Louis. B.O. Inside that big blue box is a refurbished V Vitruvian 3 robot arm, partially disassembled, loaded with software I helped create. That robot and I have been through a lot together. I have things to teach it still. I'm coming to Berlin. I'm starting a new business, and I need your help. I want to learn how to use knives correctly and which vegetables are which, and how to make my own spicy food. That's not a euphemism. It could be a euphemism. If you can teach me, I can teach the Vitruvian, and then those skills can be shared in a new way. Thanks to my former employer, the world is going to change. I think slowly at first, then faster than anyone expects. It's going to be a weird time. But along the way, I think I can get rich. We can get rich. Bio, I'll bring plenty of personal chilies. I also want to learn how to bake sourdough the way you did on Clement Street. Honestly, mine was never good. But I have one condition, and you might not like it. Let's not use starter of the mass. It almost got me, Bio, and then it got someone else. It starts out very sweetly, doesn't it? The songs, the smiles. One night I saw a dusting of pinprick lights luminous powdered sugar. That feels like a long time ago. Maybe if you're lucky or if you're you, the starter of the mass stays sweet. But if you're not, it sneaks up on you. The ambition, the impatience, the hunger. I'll tell you the whole story when I get to Berlin. There aren't any pirates in this one, but it does feature a great rocky island along with some very heroic boats. This time I'm bringing you a starter. Authentic San Francisco starter, native citizen of Cabrillo Street. I captured it myself. I will decant it into a plastic container small enough to make through airport security. If challenged, I will claim it's a moisturizer. In Berlin, it will grow. It will make no faces and sing no songs, but I guarantee you it will do its part. And you, working there with you, I will set myself at last to the task of learning mine. The end. Oh, I loved it. This time I loved this book even more, yeah. So I'd written like at the back of this book, thank you to this book for being light, simple, and ordinary. Because I guess at that time that's what I really needed, like very simple, ordinary read, which like had nothing to do with reality. Because I think I was just like tired of reading um thick, like deep books. So this book is nice. That's why I guess I'm sharing it with other people. And I'm just so glad I got to share both of the books that I liked a lot. The first one impacted me as a person a lot. This one just was just a fun read. So yeah, I'm just like ending the book reading series right here, and we'll be starting with reviews soon and other things on my other channels. I hope this channel grows because I don't know. This is my only plan for the future right now, and I really hope it works.